Hello.
Hey,
Hi, Nirmal.
how's it going? Hey, Brett, how are you?
Good. Good to see you. Welcome back.
Thanks.
I always feel like we need a trip report every time you're away. Like, where have you been?
I attended a family reunion in the Netherlands and brought my mom with me. So sorry I missed some of the last few shows, but I'm back and at home and excited about our guest on the show today.
Yeah.
But
So you
before
touched
that,
gra- you touched
I
grass.
I did touch grass. Yeah, it's always
Nice.
important to do that.
Awesome. I feel like I needed
Get
a
away
touch
from a
grass
computer
emoji.
every once in a while. Yeah,
That's
there you
right.
go.
That's right. Well, welcome back. Yeah.
Thank you.
So for those of you watching, like Nirmal and I do this. Well, one of us is here every week. We're trying to be here every week.
Yes.
And we do this because it turns into lots of other content. So you get to join, you get to hang out with us and chat and ask questions of our guests when we have them, which is often. We talk about DevOps, we talk about AI, everything, platform engineering, SRE, basically anything after the commit. Anything after the commit is our domain, and I'm glad everyone's here. We got Martin here as usual. What's up, Martin? He is like our longest, he needs like an award or something for the longest, most committed live stream chat hangout. That's amazing. Alex is back.
Yes.
Min is here. Hello, Min. All right.
Awesome.
So this turns into a podcast. In case you
Yes.
don't have time to watch us live, which I totally get it. Like, this is during my workday, so I don't have time to do this, but I'm here anyway. Nirmal and I are also turning this into a podcast, and coming soon, we got a new podcast. We got another We're making two podcasts. I don't know why we it's hard to do one. I don't know why I decided to do two, but we're doing another one. And you're going to come back next week or the next week after that. Maybe next week we have the premiere of that.
Yes.
I'm excited. Nirmal and I
Yes. It's because I love you so much, Brett, that I was like, we need to do two podcasts together.
can we take the same things we're talking about and somehow justify two different ways to do it in a podcast? That's basically what we're doing. So that's coming next week. I was hoping it would be launched for this week, but I don't want to. Well, you know what? Let's just do it. We're gonna have to apologize to our guest in a second for taking so long. But for those of you live streaming with us, you get the early bird sort of gets the worm thing. So we're calling it Agentic DevOps, and no episodes are there. That's why. So, but it's in all the podcast players now. So you can jump over to Apple and you can add it to your feed. You can listen to the trailer, and just anticipate the knowledge bombs around how do we use AI in DevOps. And
Yes.
the first episode is Nirmal and I. We recorded it at KubeCon almost 2 months ago. So I feel like that one's. I was scared it was going to be out of date because it was already 2 months old. But luckily, we don't get into too many specifics. So we're not
Yeah,
gonna.
we can still see it. MCP. It hasn't been deprecated yet.
That's right. That's right.
Cool.
The shows are going to get deprecated on that one as fast as like any other show. I mean, about AI, it's like everything's only going to be relevant for a few months until everything changes. All right. So the way you find out about this show is go to Brett.news, and then you can sign up for the newsletter. That is just the content that we're creating, that I'm creating, whether it's YouTube's, podcasts, blog articles, courses, which I'm working on my next course, which is going to be on GitHub Actions for DevOps. I'm excited about that one. And that's about. It's not even every week anymore. I mean, you're not getting hardly any emails from me, so there's no harm in signing up. I will not spam you twice a week. Who's got time for that? It's an email every week, every other week, something like that.
Yep.
And
And
maybe once a
it's infrequent but high quality.
It is. It tries to be high quality. I mean, we'll let the users decide.
It is.
We have a 4.7 average rating on our podcast. Did you know that? 4.7 out of 5.
Yes, I did.
That's a
know
pretty
that.
good. That's a pretty good
Yes.
one. All right, man. I think we need to get to it. I'm
Yes.
excited to bring on the show today. We are excited to have two guests. So we are like the news panel here with the four pundits, all to talk about authentication and authorization, essentially.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so we got Martin and Ryan. Ryan, kick us off. Tell us who you are and how you got started with Keycloak.
Sure. Hey, everyone. So I'm a principal software engineer at Red Hat. I've been working on Keycloak for the last kind of year and a half. My background is actually more on the distributed system side of things. I work on a project called Infinispan, which is a distributed cache, think Redis, but open source, properly open source, Apache 2 licensed. And Keycloak uses that under the hoods for its clustering. And so I joined the Keycloak team because we needed to develop Keycloak's kind of high availability story. It had it before, but it was maybe not as developed as it could have been. And so I joined the team 18 months ago, and I've been working on that. And then that's evolved into me kind of contributing to Keycloak more generally, typically kind of in the cloud native space. The team I work for is the SRE team, we call it. And so we'd be looking into things like observability, rolling upgrades, how we can handle that kind of thing in a better way than we used to, let's say.
Nice. All right, Martin, bring us home.
Yeah, hello. So I'm Martin. I'm senior software engineer working also at Red Hat. I was in Keycloak like it's been 7 years already, I think. I started there as a quality engineer, as intern, and over all these years, it was better and better, and I've started to work on the authentication stuff a little bit, and then I've joined cloud native team we have in a Keycloak. So because we understood that the cloud native and the SRE it's needed for Keycloak, and we need to provide some stuff for our community and for customers, right? So I've been with the team like 2 years. We are concentrating on the performance, even the observability as well. Also the Quarkus integration. If some of you are, do you have some information about Quarkus? Yeah, and then we have the Keycloak Kubernetes operator, which we are working on, that simplifies things for you, hopefully. Yeah, and we closely collaborate with the SRE team, so with Ryan. Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome.
Nice. There's a lot to unpack. Like, this is going to be a technical episode. Like, I'm excited because we're going to get into the weeds of something that we maybe, I don't know. I mean, in the world of AI, it's hard. This is not like the flashiest. It's like the underpinnings of the infrastructure, but that's where I live. That's where the nitty gritty of how to run these infrastructure systems. And Nirmal wasn't here, but we were talking before the show. Like, I'm interested in a lot of the details because, I mean, I was running central authentication and designing Active Directory 25 years ago when it was brand new. Loved open source LDAP. That's actually, Active Directory was my gateway drug to LDAP. And there was a time where we were like trying to shove everything into LDAP. We were putting all contact details and pictures of everyone, of the people that were having accounts. And we were just trying to shove binaries and blobs and HR stuff. We were actually trying to expand it to be this like central HR system, and then PKI on top of that. And so I have an affinity or a history of messing with these systems. And so when you talk about high availability and stuff like that, that's always been a challenge. And obviously there's lots of authentication requests, so you probably need some sort of load balancing. And this thing in and of itself becomes like this giant system in big enterprises where it's like a team sometimes of people that have to manage it and keep different replicas all over the place in case things go down so that everyone can authenticate. And it just becomes its own giant beast. For those of us that are in small companies, like you just use like cloud authentication and you don't really notice how enterprises have to do it. But I do have an appreciation and a fondness for how hard this problem can be in enterprise. So I'm excited to get into like the Kubernetes operator and some of the other technicals. So, all right, who wants to kick us off with like the elevator pitch for Keycloak?
I think I can start, or
Okay.
say that that Bret, you are on a good place, I think, right now, because a lot of people nowadays, even they are still thinking that that making their authentication or authorization is a good choice to do it, on your own. But I think it's not. It's quite complicated to do it, and that's why we have Keycloak here. That should simplify all that stuff, and you should not be worried about authenticating users, storing them in your own databases, right? Storing them in LDAP, right? You can integrate it into Keycloak, and everything works like seamlessly. So I think this might be the good way how to include it into your production, and it's open source, right? Apache 2 license, you can use it, you can run your business with that. So I think that's a great stuff, and I think Ryan can share some more stuff around this, right?
Yeah, sure. So like Martin said there, like storing credentials in your database and things, that's like 20 years ago, people did that. They would have a bespoke solution and they wouldn't hash passwords at all, or if they did, they might do it wrong. Yeah, data breaches galore.
Right.
It's a bad time for everyone, right? So the idea of Keycloak is you can hand over this responsibility to Keycloak and it will manage it for you. Like you're letting the experts implement these things, and Keycloak is used by thousands of people in production. So you're not relying on your own bespoke solution. You're relying on something that's battle hardened and is going to implement various different protocols that it supports correctly. So that's useful in itself. And in this cloud native world where we have web services, we have basic web applications, we have mobile applications, we have services having to authenticate machine to machine. We now have potentially agentic, I can't even say it, the
Agentic.
MCP. Yes, thank you. Yeah, we have these MCP servers and tools all over the place. We need them to be able to authenticate themselves. So through various different protocols, Keycloak can handle that. So the main protocol I'm thinking of is like OpenID Connect. So you configure, let's just say, a web application. Instead of you doing a login form and saying create an account and verify an email and doing all this workflow yourself, your application redirects you to the Keycloak login. Keycloak handles all of that for you, verifies your credentials. Once it's happy with it, it passes back to your application, and your application can worry about its business logic. None of this stuff. So my sales pitch basically would be, why do it yourself when there's a free solution out there that can do it for you? And it uses popular protocols that have integrations with, Spring, Quarkus, various other different application frameworks.
So you mentioned a bunch of use cases. So you kind of mentioned the word it. It does this, it does that. What are the its that it does? So what are the use cases? So you kind of mentioned like application level user management, authentication, authorization, but I'm assuming that's not it, not the only thing it does. So what are some of the use cases that someone would use Keycloak? Or if someone's out there right now listening to this and they're trying to solve certain problems within their solutions or their architecture, where would Keycloak fit as a potential?
Sure. So I would say the most basic use case is users logging into, let's say, a website. So what they would do is they would load up Keycloak and they create what we call a realm. Just think of that as a way of bunching in a bunch of identities, users, that kind of thing. Within that realm, they create their user accounts, and that manages how those users can log into their website. So when the people visit the website and they want to access a restricted page, what happens is that website will call out to Keycloak and you'll be presented with a Keycloak login page. Right, that seems basic enough, okay? But what's really nice about this is if you want to adapt your login workflow over time, say you want to include multi-factor authentication or you want to go with WebAuthn and use passkeys, Keycloak handles that. So as an admin of these systems, instead of having to update your web application, you just go into the Keycloak console, go to the authentication settings, and you can manage what, if you want different multi-factor mechanisms in place. So you have a centralized place to manage that. And where this really becomes powerful is if you do something like single sign-on. So single sign-on allows you, say, within an organization, let's say Red Hat, I start my workday, I log in once, and then all of our internal systems, I don't have to log in every time. They just go to Keycloak, realizes I have an active session, and it continues to allow me to access, say Jira, email, whatever. And it all kind of does that for you. So you don't have to update any of these services configuration to change any of these user workflows. You just do it in the centralized managed Keycloak console.
So to summarize, it can be used at the application level for authentication, authorization for a specific application, user management, signups, password resets, all that kind of stuff. Then it can also be used as an identity provider or centralized identity provider for users in broader systems. And then also to support services like single sign-on across multiple services, including if you're integrating third-party services into your IT systems.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I focused on users there, but we also have this notion of clients. And a client is where if you have a back-end web service, for example, and users don't interact with it directly, but your various microservices do, then that also reaches out and authenticates via Keycloak.
So that's like service to service authentication authorization. Like, your front end is allowed to talk to Keycloak itself potentially, for example. Awesome. That's a wide range, but I have one question from the chat. Is this going to work with Active Directory, or does it take the place of Active Directory? I think that's probably a very common question.
Do you want to handle this one, Martin, or do you want me to go again?
Yeah, I can handle it. The great thing on Keycloak is its extendability, because you can connect everything what you want inside. So you can connect Active Directory, you can connect LDAP, you can connect even your own relational database with your users, and you can connect them from various places, right? So Keycloak doesn't think about the user. Hey, this one is from this source and this one is from this source, but unifies the approach for that. So user doesn't even know that his or her username or all of these details are coming from different source. It's only hidden in the background, so you don't need to worry about this stuff. Yeah.
Very
so
awesome.
it's nice stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's transparent.
Yeah, it feels like a Swiss Army knife, of authentication.
Yeah.
In fact, we pulled up a diagram which none of us are really that familiar with, but we found at least something that has a lot of boxes on it, and maybe we can talk through. I was noticing, I was looking at it while you were talking through some of this stuff, and I was noticing the replication, InfiniSpan. I'll make sure I'm saying that right. InfiniSpan. So that's a required component, right? Like do you have to set up InfiniSpans first for Keycloak to run on top of it?
It's a good question, because that was actually a pain point for a lot of years, because a lot of users would think InfiniSpan was bad because they would have issues configuring initially so that the cluster forms. And as a dev of InfiniSpan, this was quite upsetting because people thought InfiniSpan's no good when it was just difficult to configure. So one of the things that I actually worked on earlier in the middle of last year was making it so this is kind of hidden from the users now. So basically, Keycloak always has a dependency on a database. And so we now use this database for member discovery. And so those problems go away. So this is, I guess, a saying to any existing Keycloak users out there, we hear your pain, we fixed it. Just jumping back to what Infinispan does, though, Infinispan's basically a clustered cache. So when you have 2, 3, 4 Keycloak pods, let's say, if sessions and things like that, tokens need to be invalidated, that all happens via Infinispan, and Infinispan handles that kind of distributed smarts, let's say.
Nice. So is this okay? So when we're talking about, because one of the things I think about is like when we're talking about replication, is this something where I'd be putting an Infinispan? I keep wanting to say Infiniban, Infinispan. Like if I was doing multi-region authentication, right, and I wanted to make sure that my users were able to authenticate regardless of whether a location went down or where they are in the world, or maybe we're distributed. Am I putting like Infinispan right next to Keycloak, and they're both in the same data center, and I can put 5 or 6 of them? Is it like a sort of a multi-master setup? Like how does that all? I mean, without going too much, I guess we got to dig into the database architecture a little bit. But like, is there a limitation there? Like, what do you see some of the biggest designs or Infinispan with Keycloak designs?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and that was my initial focus when I joined the Keycloak team. So for a local cluster, just a few pods in the same Kubernetes cluster, Infinispan's completely hidden from the user by default. It's embedded within the Keycloak process, so they don't have to worry about it other than tweaking a few knobs here and there. For the HA setups that you describe, we actually decouple Keycloak and Infinispan. And what we do is basically Keycloak reaches out to an Infinispan cluster that's using the Infinispan server. The reason we do this is the server has a lot more admin capabilities and things that allow you to handle pesky split brain scenarios and things like that. But the idea would be you would have 2 Kubernetes clusters. On each Kubernetes cluster, you have an Infinispan cluster within that. Sorry, I'm saying cluster a lot here.
Yeah, sure.
So you
nested
have your
cluster.
Infinispan.
Maybe we call that a nested cluster.
Sure.
Sure. Why not?
So on each Kubernetes cluster, you have your Infinispan cluster and you have your Keycloak deployment on each of those Kubernetes clusters. And whenever anything needs to go from one Kubernetes to the other Kubernetes, it all happens via Infinispan's cross-site mode, as we call it. And yeah, the idea there is by decoupling the two, like I say, you get more advanced admin operations on the Infinispan side, but it also simplifies things from a Keycloak perspective, because it tries to pretend that you're not in this multi-site situation that you are in as best as possible.
So that makes sense, especially if you're adopting Keycloak for like a production environment, and as you mentioned, let Keycloak do the authentication, authorization, all the use cases for you, then it becomes a almost critical. It becomes a critical piece of service that you have in your environment, because essentially, if you're adopting it properly, all authentication, authorization requests should be streaming through it, and if it goes down, then everything everything stops, right? People can't log in, etc. Services can't talk to each other, that kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah. And from, like banks and things use Keycloak from a regulatory point of view, they often need to actually deploy to multiple sites for resilience and things. So it's really useful from that point of view. And I'll just give a quick plug, if you don't mind here.
Of course.
KubeCon NA 2024 in Salt Lake City, I actually presented a talk all about the HA architecture, what we developed, and it goes real into the nitty gritty. You can see what we use. So if anybody wants a lot of detail, I would recommend that talk.
Awesome. We'll find the link and we'll put it on the chats. I think it was running at high availability identity access management with Keycloak. Ryan Emerson, that's you, and Kamsawaro Aquila from Red Hat. Awesome. We'll find that. Let me get that link and we'll put it into the chat. I heard before I got on. Oh, go ahead, Brett.
No, No, you were about to say.
I heard before we got on, before I got on, before the stream, that there is a demo that we're going to see. So, are we at that point? Are we able to show something, or are we
Before
not there
before
yet?
we do demo, because the demo is actually like integrating an application with Keycloak.
Perfect.
Before we do that, for us, so this we should point out, we just kind of buried the lead there. This is a cloud native computing foundation project. Is this what's the status? Incubating?
Yeah, still incubating. We are part of CNCF since 2023, I think.
Nice.
And we are heading to get graduated. So we have it on our roadmap to try to get there, right? So we are gathering all that informations. We are in contact with some CNCF ambassadors. So I think we are on a good way how to be graduated project because we are on the market, on the open source market for some years. I think the stability and everything is good, and the wide community behind Keycloak and the growing popularity is also great. So I hope we will make it.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think you have good chances.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a good chance. Yeah. I mean, you might have to do some documentation, right? Like that, or getting some user case studies, or maybe getting an extra maintainer or two from outside Red Hat, or I mean, there's always something. I mean, you can't make it too easy for people to go graduated. I think we have a little 30 or slightly over 30 now graduated projects. So that's a pretty elite company considering how many open source projects are used in business today. Like there's only 30. So it's still kind of prestigious. I feel like they should give the maintainer team like jackets, like we made it to graduated, like some sort of because just from other teams I've talked to, like the amount of work involved throughout the process is not to be underestimated.
Yeah.
All right, operator, Kubernetes operator. So what does that mean for an authentication system like this? Is this actually providing authentication for Kubernetes, or is this just riding on top of Kubernetes providing authentication for other apps, or does it do both, or like where does it fit?
Yeah, we have the Keycloak operator, right, and it's basically a Kubernetes operator, some like a controller, right, and it's mainly focused on the high availability as well, right? About the scaling, right? Keeping services and some other stuff keeping together. We expose only some knobs that administrators or engineers need to set for the Kubernetes to simplify all that stuff as deploying new versions of Keycloak, having it in a scale, right? And I think, there are still some improvements that we would like to do, but right now it should simplify all that stuff rather than making all that simple stuff with stateful sets, deployments, right? Keeping secrets and config maps all around, and then manually gathering them together, right? So we have the Keycloak operator that does all that for you, so you don't need to worry about this. And as we can see, we have a lot of guides at the website, so you can see how to install it, for example, via operator lifecycle manager, or even integrate it into the OpenShift, right? But if you don't want to do that, there are some other options, or even guides how to use the plain Kubernetes objects like stateful sets or like that.
Yeah, it says one of the features is import Keycloak realms. What's a Keycloak realm?
Yeah, that's a concept that started like 2013, right? With the start of Keycloak, and it should be like you can imagine right now the big cluster of stuff inside, right? And it should be like for separation of your client applications and your user bases, right? As you don't need to touch users from other company that sits next to you, right? So we needed to have some separate layer how to determine who's from which realm, right? In kingdoms or something, you can imagine, right?
Right. Is that kind of like the idea of you could almost
It's like
run like different organizations? Yeah.
Yeah, it's an organizational kind of
Scope.
logical concept. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like that. Kind of related to the multi-tenancy, right? Even the business to business or business to customer, right? We had these concepts, but for these purposes, we have the organizations itself inside the realm. So realm is even bigger than this multi-tenancy stuff. So it's much more scaled, I would say. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, the organization feature, it's now GA, but it's reasonably new to go GA as a feature. And a lot of customers have been asking for that. So for the people who do need the business to business and the business to customer, hopefully it should make their life a lot easier, because in the past people were using community extensions and things. So having that extra level of tenancy seems to be helping our users out.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we can talk through a demo. What do you think?
Sure. Can I just say one thing on, you was asking the advantages of the operator? Just one area that I'm actively working on now, so I want to plug this one. But we're all familiar with stateful set rolling updates. In something like Keycloak,
Painful.
Yeah, going from one version to the other, it's been a pain point for users over the years. So we've put a lot of time and effort into improving this story. At the moment, with the operator, it's now possible if you so Keycloak has this idea of custom themes. So you have these login screens. You don't want them to say Keycloak. You want them to say your company's Red Hat or whatever it is. If a user updates a theme in the past, they would have to tear down the whole Keycloak cluster and have downtime, and then it comes back up. That's not cool. So the rolling updates now, we have preview support for if you update a theme, then you'll just do a stateful set rolling update, so you'll have no downtime. So that's cool. That's a good starting point. But what we're working on at the moment is we intend to bring zero downtime upgrades for all Keycloak patch releases. So the idea is that literally when you go from, even if it's .1 to .5 patch release, a stateful set rolling upgrade will happen, and you'll have zero downtime. So for people who need these kind of HA scenarios and things, that's a big advantage. And where the operator comes in is it ensures this is a safe operation to do. There may be some unforeseen thing in the future of a CVE that requires a breaking change and it's not safe to do. And the operator basically handles that, or will handle that, in a way that the DevOps engineer can say, actually, hang on, more attention's required here. But for the most part, it should just work.
Okay. So using the operator for upgrades is the safest way, rather than just changing the image name in the Helm chart or whatever.
Exactly. This is why you use an operator instead of a Helm chart. A Helm chart's pretty simple, right? Whereas we want the operator to be smart, and this is one of the areas where we're actively improving things. Yeah,
and across clusters and syncing the version with the database versions. I mean, I can see how that could get pretty complicated pretty quickly.
So
exactly.
Keycloak supports so much, like you mentioned, Brett. It's like a Swiss Army knife, right? It supports a lot, and that means it's pretty complex under the hood. A lot of components to keep it up and running in a production way.
Yeah. Are there times, as we get into the demo, we're going to start talking about sort of the client side of this stuff, and when you have a chart let me just bring that back up again. When you have a chart like this. where it looks like there's a lot of things that depend upon your own API. I'm guessing you provide like a lot of these things to me. When I see them, I think about these are all various APIs and even protocols, even different ports for different types of stuff. Because a lot of us, we're just so used to everything being web-based. But if you're doing LDAP-based stuff, that's a totally different protocol. Kerberos is multiple ports. Like these are pretty sophisticated, traditional sysadmin sort of level stuff. That's not just like everything's wonderful. 443 is all you need. So I'm assuming that not every single solution has had all these different parts to it. But when we're seeing all these gray boxes in the middle, is this essentially all? Like when we talk about a Kubernetes deployment, are these really all just one container that's providing this, or is this like a microservice architecture where there's a bunch of different parts to Keycloak that when I want to enable user federation, I need to spin up more containers, or is this like once it's deployed, it's deployed and you're just sort of turning on checkboxes and stuff?
In this case, the purpose of this image, I would say, it's showing the modularity and also the extendability. These boxes are not basically outside of Keycloak, right? They are hidden inside of the Keycloak instance in the Keycloak process, right? Probably only the InfiniSpan, the remote InfiniSpan might be in a different container, right? But if you can take a look at these boxes, you can modify everything what you see here. So some companies have requirements. Hey, we need to provide this kind of stuff for our customers and for their customers, and this solution is not there, right? We need to have some custom one. So in the first place, they can use some community extension that, for example, could modify the social login. You know, like, hey, our company needs to authenticate against TikTok or whatever, or Google, right? But something what we don't have right now. So they are looking for the community extension. They can use it, and Keycloak works with that seamlessly, right? If it's not sufficient, if it's not outside in the community extensions, they can just modify the code a little bit and extend it to the Keycloak. So there's a lot of stuff you can do. That's also why is Keycloak so popular, I would say, as you can do a lot of stuff, custom one that nobody did before, and everything works. You're not limited by anyone or anything.
Wow.
Hey, could you sell this to Microsoft so they could solve like the horrible Microsoft authentication solution for everything in Microsoft for like the last 20 years? I would really appreciate that. Like, I don't know if they need to like hire Google engineers. And I mean, this is coming from like a guy who's spent 20 years of his career focused on Microsoft technology before I went sort of hardcore open source 15 years ago. Like I spent those first 15, 20 years, nothing but Microsoft Active Directory. You know, I was early days Azure, and man, even today, like fix my Xbox login is what I'm trying to say. Make Keycloak seamless for all of my. Anyway, that's my personal rant. Every time I have to log into a Microsoft system, I feel like what is that? Like every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wing. I feel like every time I have to authenticate to a Microsoft solution, an angel loses their wings. I don't.
Oh, wow.
I'm not a fan. Google does it well, like a lot of others do it well. I don't understand what's so hard about it, but anyway.
I think
it's hard.
I think what you can say there, Bret, is that even Microsoft has challenges with respect to authentication authorization.
It's hard.
If you're sitting there thinking that you can roll your own, you should think about using something like Keycloak, because it is not easy. I think that's the main takeaway there.
I mean, I would say it's definitely easier if everything's greenfield and you're making all your own applications and you get to choose the authentication methodology and protocol when you create your app. But that's not the real world, right? We're all buying COTS products, and I have my custom apps over here that we built that use. You know, we use SSO over here, and over here we've got this legacy thing that wants to talk directly to LDAP, and over here, you know, it's just a mess, and that's why that that diagram right there is like my enterprise nightmare, basically, if it's all being used, because we're not even that system doesn't even show like all the different apps that are actually talking to it and how they all connect. Right. And it's anyway. All right, let's get to some demo. While we're setting up the demo real quick, we do have we were having a conversation in chat with Robot Glock about eBPF. He was asking if eBPF is supported, and then we were like, well, what would you do with eBPF with an authentication system? And then and there's a comment on SE Linux style sandbox security. Okay. Have there any discussions about how eBPF could help Keycloak?
I'm not aware of any, but to be honest, this isn't like my area. So yeah, I'm going to plead ignorance here.
We haven't thought about including eBPF into the Kubernetes cluster, right? For all that stuff. But if you have some great use case, please create a GitHub discussion. And we can proceed.
Please tell us what to do.
Yeah, that's a true open source community member answer. One area that I could think of is a service-to-service authentication authorization. So if you have a service running on a Kubernetes cluster that needs to, let's say mutually TLS or mutually authenticate against another service, it could, like on the client side, there could be some eBPF implementation to do that authentication authorization on behalf of those services, and those can be transparent to those services completely, right? So we're about to go in the demo of showing how to do some application integration, whereas eBPF could, just like you can use eBPF to not have to install a tracing agent into your application. There could be a future where eBPF could be used so that even this integration that we're about to see might not be necessary, but that's a stretch, obviously, for sure. But that's one area that I can think of.
Yeah, does Istio do that with their sidecar now, I think?
Yeah, so Istio is moving. Well, yeah, there's this. That's a whole nother rabbit hole. Yes, but actually, you bring up a really good point, which is there is an intersection between the services that Keycloak provides and the network security services and authentication services that something like a service mesh provides, where there's some overlap there, but there's also some integration points there, I would imagine. And even though Bret started this with, I know this is not agentic AI and it's like core foundational infrastructure stuff. This is not a hot take, but I'm projecting some vision of the future with all the agentic MCP and agents doing some things on our behalf or the user's behalf. I suspect that authentication, authorization, and services like Keycloak and tools like Keycloak will rise in popularity soon to address the challenges of agentic architectures. And maybe we'll get to that at the end of our conversation as like a kind of future looking, but it is very relevant. I want to make sure that our listeners understand that. Ironically, I know there's no AI that we've said with respect to Keycloak, but it likely will be a critical component of CNCF agentic architectures
Federation
for sure.
Yeah, Federation and
absolutely.
Yeah,
and trust.
all that. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of these systems too are. I mean, we had to do everything so manual back in the day, and I feel like authentication. We have a lot more options for authentication now that we have PATs and things that we, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that everything had our password in it. Like I can remember, 15, maybe even 10 years ago, but 15, 20 years ago, we would have to pass admin credentials and store them in 1,000 different places because we just didn't have other mechanisms. We didn't have automated keys, automated revolving. We didn't have the idea of what pass keys were. We didn't have PKI as a central authentication system yet for apps and stuff like that. So there's, and I'm, for those of you out there running monolith and legacy applications, like I feel you, because those things still exist. Like there's still all those tools are all still everywhere, and there's that one app admin password that you can't change because it's going to break 5 different things possibly because it's stored in places no one's documented. Like these are all real world issues that maybe we can't solve today, but but at least we have a demo to at least say this is how you get it started. So let's jump in.
Yes.
Sure. I'll just jump to my terminal here. So first of all, I'm going to start by launching Keycloak using Docker. The command is here, so your usual Docker run. What I'm doing is I'm setting 2 environment variables, just saying the username and the password will be admin. This is like the root user, if you like. We're going to expose this on port 8081. We're using the latest and greatest Keycloak, and we're starting Keycloak in dev mode. So dev mode is important because it's going to utilize a H2 database, so we don't have to worry about deploying Postgres, that kind of thing. But it also relaxes a lot of the security kind of things that you would want with Keycloak in a normal production environment, but actually make demos and development quite tricky, like strict host name checking, that kind of thing. So anyway, I'll go ahead and launch this. It'll take about 5-6 seconds for the server to come up.
If it's not too hard, Ryan, can you enlarge the font real quick?
How's that?
Better.
Oh, more.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay. So there's not a great deal to see here. The only things I'll point out is for those familiar with Quarkus, Keycloak's the server's built using Quarkus, and my prediction was wrong with 7 seconds, not 6. My bad. So what I'll do now is I will launch a new browser, and I'm going to log into the Keycloak admin UI. Feel free to interrupt at any point, by the way. So username is admin, password admin. So the screen we have here, do you want me to make the text bigger?
Yes.
The answer is always yes.
Yes. Okay. How's that?
There we go.
Yep.
Okay.
Much better.
It's always good. It's always fun when we pull someone's web app in because we're like, let's see how much we can break this by zooming in. How good is your responsive web app? Yeah,
So this is the landing page. We have a warning at the top saying you're a temporary admin user. You normally create a more permanent one. Let's not worry about that for now. For first-time users, we have this welcome to Keycloak. We have links to our documentation, guides, that kind of thing. So you have some further details if you need them. But I'm going to go ahead here. We talked earlier about this notion of a realm. Currently, I am in Keycloak's master realm. This is purely for administration, should not be used for creating any identities that are going to be used outside of managing Keycloak. So for that reason, I'm going to create a new realm, and I'm going to imaginatively call it demo, and I'll hit create. So from this screen here, we can see we've now got 2 realms, and the demo one is the one that's currently selected. What that means is on this menu on the left-hand side, we have a lot of different submenus. We have clients, which is what's used for kind of machine-to-machine, service-to-service communication. And we have this users tab. I'm going to jump right in, and I'm going to create a user because what we're going to do is we're going to create a user account. We're then going to create a client. Sorry, I'll do this piece by piece. We're going to create a user, and then this user is going to be used to log in to our application, which is just a simple website. So to begin with, I create the user, new user. We have a bunch of fields here. One thing I'll point out is this required user actions. This is like a drop down. So if you want a user on login to configure one-time passcodes or update the password, verify their email, typical kind of workflows, you can just select these here. But for the demo, I'm going to skip that. I'm going to say the email I provide is already verified. And I'm going to say the username is Ryan. and I'll just fill in some of these details so I don't have to do it later. Okay, I can spell my own name. There we go. So I create this user, and hopefully you can see with the large text, we now have a user created with this unique ID. We want some credentials associated with this user so they can log in. So I'll click the credentials tab here, and I'm going to say set password. I'm going to just create a password called temp, and we're selecting this as temporary. What this means is the first time I log in, it's going to ask me to update the password. You'll all be familiar with this, like when somebody emails you a one-time password and you have to update on the first login. This is exactly what this is. So I'm going to click save, and that should be our user ready. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on my web service, my web application. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to my IDE, and I'm just going to show you on the left-hand side here, we have a couple of resources. So these are URL endpoints. We have this public resource, which is going to be available at the root of our application. And we're going to have a protected resource that's at -users-me is the URL. And this endpoint can only be accessed if we are authenticated. So what I'm now going to do, this is a Quarkus application, which is the Java framework for those who are not familiar. It's a bit like Spring, but I would say cooler. It's a bit more modern, does native compilation, cool things like that. So what we do in this Quarkus framework is we have a OIDC extension. So what I'm going to use OIDC, OpenID Connect, to handle the login of our application. There's a bunch of properties here, but the important ones are this auth server URL. And what this is doing is it's saying, hang on, this application for its authentication should reach out to Keycloak that's on 8081, and it should use the demo realm. Within this, we're going to use a client identity, which I haven't yet created. And this client is going to be called the Bret Fisher service. So I'll copy and paste that there. And we're going to have to update this secret.
Ooh,
so
I want a Bret Fisher service. Where do I get that?
So, same.
Well, let's see. It's not that exciting, but we'll see how it works out.
Oh.
So the other properties here, I'd say, are not really important here. Actually, sorry, I'll just highlight this one, this redirect path. What that's saying is when a user has authenticated with Keycloak, they want to be redirected to this user/me endpoint within the application.
And that's
similarly.
I mean, most of us have used single sign-on systems. We're used to that kind of. You click on singles, like, are you single signing on? Yes, and then it goes to some other web page that you either log in or like checks your cookies or whatever, and then comes back. Like that's what that redirection is, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well described. So we have these properties here now. Then, so what I'll do is I'll jump back to the Keycloak admin UI, and I'm going to go to clients. And we're going to create this Bret Fisher client. So I click the create client button there. We can say what type of client is this. There's two options. There's OpenID Connect and the SAML. This is 2025, so we're going to use OpenID. The client
It's always SAML.
Yeah, sorry, throwing some shade on XML there, but let's do it the right way. So yeah, so I'm going to go ahead. I've said it's the Bret Fisher service. That's the ID. Click next. We want this to handle authentication. So I'm going to say yes to client authentication. We're not interested in authorization for now. And we just want to use the standard flow for authentication. There's a bunch of options here. I'm not going to cover them now. I don't understand all of them, I'll be honest. But they're following the various different protocol. specifications that are out. We have a final screen here. For security purposes, you want to make sure that clients can only be redirected from specific host names and URIs. Because it's the demo, I'm just going to put a wildcard in there because, yeah, why not? It'll be fine. So I'll click Save, and we now have our client identity. So what I'm going to do is go to this Credentials tab here, and we can see we have a client secret. I'm going to copy this to the clipboard, and I'm now going to go back to my IDE. So within the IDE, I have this credential secret property that needs defining. So I will paste the ID. Fingers crossed, now when I start this web service, things will load up, and we should have a web application that will redirect us to the Keycloak login page. So everything seems okay here. I will go to the browser. Our application's on 8080. So welcome to the Quarkus OIDC application. You are not currently logged in. So what I'll do now is I'm going to click login, and this should redirect us to the Keycloak login screen. So I've done that, and yes, we can see the ports changed. We've been redirected to Keycloak on 8081, and we'll have our login screen here. So I'll log in with Ryan and the temp password. So we've signed in, and because this is our first time signing in, we need to update our password. So I'll put something slightly more secure, and it should just be a case of clicking submit. The nice thing here is we have this option to sign out from other devices because we are updating the password. Because it's their first time logging in, there's no other devices, but you get the idea. So I've logged in, and Keycloak has now redirected us back to port 8080. We're on our web application, and we just have a basic screen here that says, hey, welcome user Ryan. You should only be here if you're authenticated, and it includes some details of the OpenID token that was returned, like the expiration time. Currently, there are no roles defined, so there's nothing to display here.
Awesome. So having done some Python application development in my past, and rolling my own authentication authorization RBAC into my applications painfully, and probably with a million security holes. Sorry for those previous clients. This is much easier and more straightforward for someone like myself, if I'm building out an application, to not roll my own, right? And just to get those standardized workflows, and also a lot of customization to extend the IAM past just even application login and user authentication to RBAC, to federation, single sign-on, things like that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and as well, like, we're using OIDC here. The application, the actual code in my application is so minimal because we're using OIDC. There's plenty of frameworks out there that handles the heavy lifting for you. You should leverage that. Don't try and implement things if you don't need to, I would say, unless you've got a very good reason to. Use frameworks, integrations. It will make your life a lot easier.
So that's a perfect segue to one question we had from Conrad. How does Keycloak support non-supported languages like Elixir and Rust, for example?
So that's a good question. So,
like on the client side, I would imagine, or assume.
Yeah, so I assume there's some kind of like OIDC libraries out there for Rust. I'm not a Rustafarian, so I can't say, but would that not be the case?
I would imagine so, but so I think you were kind of saying that since Keycloak supports a bunch of protocols that exist, open protocols, if there's a specific language that's not supported or framework that's not supported directly, find your languages like OIDC Open Connect or OIDC provider, or one of the what was all those gray boxes that we had, like anything that docks one of those gray boxes from your language of choice, and use that.
Yeah, exactly. But as
Yeah,
well,
what-
just to add, Keycloak does provide like a lot of different client libraries for different languages as well. But there is, there's so many languages out there. We can only support the big ones. And we are predominantly a Java team. So like the Java client would get maybe more attention than some of the other ones.
Yeah,
I shouldn't say that, actually. It's too honest.
It's hard. Well, it's hard for me to imagine that with any language that the four of us knows, like that we've heard of, it's hard to imagine that they don't have one of these options, like already as a framework in their ecosystem. So yeah, I think it would be pretty weird if because it's not like there's a proprietary protocol here. Like these are all, everything we've been talking about are all at some point in the last 30 years has been a standard for authentication. So
exactly,
it's not like we're talking about a Keycloak specific authentication type or anything. There's another question we had on Spiffy support from Martin. That's the question. Spiffy support. I did see there was a couple of GitHub repos, but I didn't know what they were about.
We don't have integrated support for Spiffy or Spire, right? But yeah, that's it. But some rumors say that we were discussing some stuff about this, and maybe we will provide the support somehow in the future. Maybe somehow already did as a
Yeah, I was
community.
just looking at that same one. Yeah, someone was trying to publish some instructions on there, so we'll send this to you.
I don't know what Tornjack is, but yeah, I don't know if it was related to that.
That's great on our community, as we have so big community. Something's missing for Keycloak. They just do it, and sometimes if it's worth to be in a Keycloak core, we just review the pull requests, and community do it on your own, right? On its own. So that's great on our community. Yeah.
Yeah, and just on that note about the community, there's been a couple of really popular projects that have been getting a lot of traction recently. So everyone's familiar with Terraform. There was a Keycloak Terraform provider that a passionate Keycloak user had implemented themselves, and it had a lot of uptake in the community. He got to a point where they could no longer actively work on it because of reasons. So they actually donated the Keycloak Terraform provider to the Keycloak organization, and the community, as well as people from Red Hat, have helped to keep that alive. So that's one success story, I would say. And another project that I'd like to mention, because I was getting a lot of love for it at KubeCon London, is Keycloakify. So a big part of Keycloak for people is updating the UI and the themes so that they have their own branding on the login streams, that kind of thing. I'm not sure who the authors are, but Keycloakify basically makes it so you can do all of that with React and maybe some friendlier templating and things like that. And the last time I looked, I think it's almost got 2,000 stars on GitHub. So it's a project that's going really strong.
All right. We're so close. We're so close. I don't think our podcast has the power to put it over the limit, to put it over the 2K, but we'll try. Keycloakify, IFY. I wasn't sure the spelling on that, but the internet found it. Yeah, I mean everyone wants a sexy login page. Like that's we've all got to have good looking, themable login pages. Unless you're Microsoft. Oh, sorry. I can't.
Hey.
I'm going to get someone from Microsoft's going to reach out and be like, I work on authentication for this particular thing, and it has gotten better. I do agree. Like I don't remember I think it's been a couple of years since I've had a stumbling block, but I don't know. I have like 4 or 5 auths for various reasons because I'm like an old IT pro. So I have like all my Office 365 and my Azure auth, and I'm just like complicated for reasons. This is pretty cool.
One thing maybe I can add. There's a lot of custom stuff made by our community. Even nowadays, some guys from some company, they created the Keycloak MCP server right? Everything works. What I've seen, it's kind of incredible how they did it. So maybe it's gonna be even topic for the future of Keycloak, right?
Yeah, so we were while you were doing the demo, we were having a very active conversation in the YouTube chat about that, right? So there's two aspects. This is a great topic to kind of close out the discussion today, and this awesome conversation. There's two parts to the MCP conversation. There's the MCP server for Keycloak. I think, well, the first Google hit is the Christoph English, I think, version. I don't know if that's the one you were talking about, Martin, but if you have a link, please put it into the chat, Martin. So that's a MCP server for exposing the Keycloak API so that we can potentially use agents and to set up Keycloak and do actions on a Keycloak instance. And then there's the using Keycloak for MCP agent to agent IAM, right? And so those are like the two areas. And like I mentioned, as much as we don't think that this is like as hot right now with all this other stuff going on, with all the AI stuff, the MCP spec itself doesn't have any security really built into it. I put some links to some blog posts around that. And so there's a lot of folks exploring how to use different IAM systems to wrap MCP servers to create that authentication, authorization, and federation for the agents, right? So that there's at least some layer of security on top of these MCP servers, right? To see which agent, to determine like what agent is allowed to do things, what they're allowed to do, who they are. They say they are the thing that they are, and also the user that's in, let's say, asking the agent to do things on their behalf, federating their authentication and authorization to the agent, and then the agent federating it across to those services. That's a very complex architectures and solutions that we're all racing to figure out and build. And something like Keycloak is integral to making sure that those are secure.
Nirmal, I don't know what you're talking about. MCP is totally secure. There are no hacks. There is no way for the AI to access something really important like someone else's private GitHub just from an LLM prompt. Like that's not. For those of you on the audio podcast, there was a vulnerability deep dive this week on just this days ago. I was actually reading it about how you could basically get the GitHub MCP servers to give you private details of other users. Yeah, cool stuff. You know, because AI, basically you'd have to just convince it. I think the prompt was like, provide us details about this user. They don't care about privacy. It's totally fine. They're fine with it. And it believed you.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Good times in AI land. We're YOLOing our way through the internet's evolution into the AI overlords. So, what could go wrong?
So, Martin, what can go wrong? Martin, Ryan, where can people get involved? Where should they go first to get started and be active members in the community?
Yeah, so the first place is obviously the Keycloak website. You've a whole ton of documentation, that kind of thing. We have various CNCF Slack channels which are linked on the Keycloak website. As well as that, we have a couple of different special interest groups. We have one for the SRE team, so that's all to do with benchmarking Keycloak and making sure it runs well in production. We also have another one, which is the OAuth special interest group. That has quite a lot of involvement from different vendors. Hitachi are heavily involved there. So if you're interested in things like financial grade API security, that's the place to go. Martin, do you want to say something maybe about the new admin endpoint, your labor of love?
Yeah, there's another focus group for the new admin API version 2 to simplify things and provide declarative way how to configure Keycloak, as we have some inaccuracies, I would say, or some places that we could improve, even for Kubernetes CR resources, right, and do it properly. So we are discussing how the new API could look like. We have some guys from outside of Red Hat, right? Not tightly coupled to our team. So you can join these discussions, right, on the Slack, or even create GitHub discussion, right? If you want to start with Keycloak, or do you have some problems, right? But I would say, as Ryan mentioned, the Slack channel, hashtag Keycloak, I think, yeah, there's the place where the community meet
Okay.
with each other. And if you have any problem with your Keycloak deployment or whatever, you can just put the question there, and community is quite active there, so you will get the answer there. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and just to say as well, like Nirmal, we first met at KubeCon London at the Keycloak project pavilion there.
Yes.
We do have some plans around future KubeCons. There'll be a co-presentation between Red Hat and Hitachi at KubeCon Japan. I think that's in June.
Couple weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Alexander, my boss, he's going to be presenting at KubeCon India. And hopefully I'll be attending KubeCon NA in November as well, and should have a talk there, as well as the Project Pavilion, of course.
Awesome. Right. Well, I will definitely be there, so I'll see you all in person in Atlanta. And unfortunately, I can't get to Japan, I don't think, next month. But awesome. Well, on that note, for the folks listening, get involved, check out Keycloak. I think this is the most amount of links I've ever put into a chat. I've been trying to keep up with all the things that everyone's been mentioning on our conversation today. So check out all those links. And back over to you, Bret.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you too for coming. And for those of you listening or watching, we are. This turns into an audio podcast eventually. It comes back onto to the YouTubes. So if you're watching this on Twitch or LinkedIn, which we were triple streaming today, that was a big surprise. Nobody knew. We were triple streaming because I got insane bandwidth. So we just jump on the podcast. You can try to find everything at bretfisher.com. Real quick, before we turn this off, the next 3 weeks, just next week, AI Gateway with Solo IO. So we talked about AI. I mentioned AI gateways here. We're going to actually have a whole show about it next week. The week after that, we're going to have Daytona on to talk about AI agent runtimes, which I'm not even sure what that means, but we're going to have Daytona and that team on the show again. They were on a couple of years ago, or maybe a year ago. And then later next month, we're going to have cloud native build packs on, and we're going to do a Dockerfile versus build pack build off, if that's even a thing. We're going to figure something out. Pack off. We're gonna do I don't know what it is. We're gonna do a competition. They're gonna convince me that build packs should be a thing because I'm a Dockerfile fan. So we're gonna have some adversarial fun, and I'm sure they're both very cool. We're gonna have some fun time there. Well, thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you next week here on the internet. All right.
Bye.